Regular meeting of the planning commission to order, and we have a full board, so we don't have to see any alternates. The first item is public hearing, the application 1401 of Ed Lally and Associates agent Wendy E. and Shelley Spencer, owners, requesting re-subdivision of the property located at 5 Pinnacle Mountain Road, map H11, block 106, lot 001, to create 2 lots, zone R40.
Mr. Chairman, you have a piece of correspondence, an email that I received today from the first selectman. Neighbors had asked that this meeting be continued so that they have time to review the application. In addition to that, I have to tell you that the applicant failed to post a sign in front of the property as is required. So what they've requested is that the hearing be opened, as has been done, and continued, simply continued to the next meeting, so that people can have time to review the application, continue it, and consider it your next meeting. So that's what I recommend.
Okay. Second item, discussion of possible
You
action.
need to,
Yeah.
So the public hearing's open.
public hearing's open. What you need to do, or what I would recommend, respectfully, is that somebody make a motion to continue it to your next meeting.
Okay.
So,
Second.
Is there anyone who wants to speak tonight?
I wouldn't recommend that you do it, because the applicant's not here.
Yeah.
So if you do that, then you've essentially got a de facto public hearing.
So we'll just open the public hearing.
Just open it, right, and then just continue it.
Continue. We have a motion to continue. Second. Discussion?
I would simply say that if there are any members of the public that are interested in it, please just give us a call, contact us, where your file is available at any time. Happy to go over it with anybody that wants to. Happy to talk to them or their attorneys or whomever, at any time that they wish.
Okay, and we'll address it again in 2 weeks. Okay, discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carried. Okay, second item, the CGS 8-3A referral to zoning commission, number 14-37 of Robin Messier Pearson, Esquire, for K&K Developers, Inc., applicant Infinity 4 LLC, owner, for a zone change from I-1 to I-1 and PAD on the property located at 34 Hot Meadow Street, map E18, block 117, lot 001, zone I-1.
Right, Mr. Chairman, this is a discussion with regard to, as the agenda says, a referral to the zoning commission on this particular matter. The matter is also going to the Wetlands Commission at this time as well. We'll have a public hearing at that time for wetlands and environmental issues. Just to note, I did give each of the members a copy of 8-3 that pertains, the statutes that pertain to this section of the statutes that pertain to this section of the application, and also gave you a copy of the section of the plan of conservation and development that pertain to this application as well. So if you have any other questions, feel free to ask, and I would just turn it over to the applicant to discuss the issue, make his presentation.
Thank you, Hiram. Good evening. Hi, I'm Chris Ferrero. I'm with Buston O'Neill. I have to say, formerly of Ferrero Hicks and Associates, business here in Simsbury for 27 years. So this site is familiar not only to me personally, but it has a long history, as you'll see. As part of the PAD application process, this zone change process, clearly planning needs to weigh in, and my understanding is that the planning board weighs in terms of the conformance of the application to the plan of conservation and development. So what I'm going to sort of show you is I'll walk you through the existing conditions and the program and sort of the concepts of how we arrived at a design and a plan, and how that plan conforms to the intent and specifics of your plan of conservation and development. So this application is for a parcel. This is the former River Oaks parcel. The Avon town line is here in the southern part of Simsbury along Route 10. And that's the site. It's about a 60-acre site. We are applying for a PAD zone, and we will have a number of referral agencies to go through as part of that process. But fundamentally, the property, as I'm sure everybody in this room knows, is primarily an open field. It has the existing CL&P facility in the middle, which as part of this application will remain and continue in existence. And it's basically two parcels of land. This parcel here and this parcel here. We are proposing that be divided up a little bit more as part of the application. The only real vegetation on the site, except from the ornamental vegetation associated with the CL&P parcel, is a drainage ditch, which is classified as a wetlands, a low functional value wetlands, and its associated vegetation. There's a CL&P drainage easement that basically drains their parking lot systems into that ditch. So by introduction, my client, the applicant, is Garden Homes. And Garden Homes is headquartered out of New Jersey, but they've built over 40,000 rental apartment units, built and sold over 40,000 condominiums and single-family housing units, both in the Northeast and nationally. So this is a player that's interested in Simsbury. They understand the market, they understand the product, and as I go through this presentation, you'll see some of that work unfold. We have a pretty good, very talented, I think, local team. Myself from Fuss & O'Neill is kind of leading the charge. Bill Krosky Architects, who's done a lot of work here in town, particularly on the historic preservation side of things, is the project's architect. We do have a full market assessment and fiscal impact analysis, which we'll be presenting to the Economic Development Commission in 2 days, prepared by RKG Associates. As Ira mentioned, Robin Pearson of Alter & Pearson is the attorney, and Mike Klein from Environmental Services, again, no stranger to Simsbury, is on the environmental side of it. So Garden Homes has a number of projects already in Connecticut, so they're not new to the state. They've been here before. They've developed sizable projects in each of these communities. So, you know, the Plan of Conservation and Development looks at this parcel as almost a transitional parcel, and it suggests two approaches to redeveloping the parcel. The preferred approach is as zoned, I-2, office industrial. The second, acknowledging that there may not, nor in our foreseeable future, be a market for that, provide an explanation and opportunity for a secondary approach, an alternative approach. It is this alternative approach in the Plan of Conservation and Development that we are going to be following. And this alternative approach is well defined with what they call desirable performance objectives. There are very clear tenets, design and planning tenets, that are to be followed when developing under this alternative approach. So the site is here. Obviously, Route 10 and 202 is on the top, north is to the right. Over the Avon Town line, of course, we have mixed use, primarily retail and residential uses, and not only single family. There's multifamily residential uses on the west side of Hot Meadow Street. You have some fairly substantial office complexes on both sides of the site, and you have the beautiful Nodbrook State Wildlife Area all to this part of the site. One of the key components of this project, and it's a subject of, really the subject and the focus of how we laid this project out, quite frankly, is the bike trail. The Farmington River Bike Trail abuts this site. It connects downtown Avon, it connects Weetog, it connects Simsbury, and all points north and south of it. As you will see as we go through the site design, this bike trail is intended to be a real, true feature as part of this development, to the extent that we think there's people that bike will actually be attracted to this for its proximity to that system, to that non-motorized mobility system. So we've done our homework. We understand the POCD quite well, as I think you'll see at the end of this presentation. Fuss & O'Neill actually did prepare the Route 10 corridor study. That Route 10 corridor study, one of the primary tenets of that study was to maintain the character of a 2-lane road going through Simsbury in light of potential development that would force it into a 3 or 4-lane system. And of course, the previous application of River Oaks on the property, and Fuss & O'Neill's participation in that was traffic and civil engineering. So we have a lot of this background data. We have a lot of good data on this site. We updated all of that data for this application. I see some of you have the binder. It's a rather large book, but that book is filled with all the technical data that's backing up sort of our assertions in terms of the planning project. But just in general, the comparison of what is going to be proposed and what you'll see in a minute from the Garden Homes master plan to what was originally proposed about 7 or 8 years ago as part of the River Oaks master plan is roughly just less than half the density, half the total square footage, half the parking, half the impact, et cetera, et cetera. So the POCD, these are right out of the Plan of Conservation and Development. These are the fundamental design tenets, how we want to grow in this particular area of town under that suggested alternative approach. So I'm not going to read all these, but thoroughly prepared master plan. Open space will be a key characteristic of our component proposal, as you'll see in a minute. The view corridors, we've done an extensive analysis of view corridors relative to your ability to continue to see the ridge line after this project is built out. The connectivity is a big issue that I mentioned with respect to the bike trail and its connectivity to other areas of Simsbury, Avon, and beyond. And you know, the PAD application, the PAD zone requires mixed uses. It doesn't allow a single use. So we are proposing a series of mixed uses, one of which is housing. The housing component of those mixed uses would be built as part of the first phase of the project. Now, again, I'm not going to read these, but these are the desirable performance objectives right out of the Plan of Conservation and Development. And they're broken into design context, functional areas, form and content, roads, parking, architecture, and streetscape. I can go back to any one of these as part of this presentation and discuss any one individually. I don't want to spend a lot of time doing it now, but I think as I go through this, I'll be hitting pretty much how we've addressed all of this and our conformance to these tenets in the proposal. So let's start with views. Plan of Conservation and Development. Views to the ridge line on this property are dramatic. This is somewhat of an iconic piece of land. It's been a fallow field for a long time, and as such, drivers on Route 10 and 202 can have in some cases, terrific views of the mountain. The Hugh Line Tower, this is Simsbury's character. So when this is actually the first analysis we did as part of this project. The analysis here is a series of cross-sections from Hot Meadow Street to the Talcott Ridge. And these cross-sections are illustrated vertically here. So the purpose of this study was to begin to look at if you have buildings that are 1-story, or 2-story, or 3-story, or a peaked roof, or a flat roof, how far would you have to set those buildings away from Hot Meadow Street in order for you to be able to sort of see over the roof of that building and see that ridge line? So the Plan of Conservation and Development's program is that where at all possible, preserve that ridge line. So this analysis provides to some extent the basis for some of the initial parts of the layout, particularly the relationship of building to its proximity to Route 10. This is to some extent the results of that analysis. Now, we are not suggesting that these are zoning setbacks. These are voluntary setback recommendations. There are existing vegetative obstructions, so it's not a clear view, and I'll show you a sequence of pictures in a minute. For example, that wetland that I described earlier, it's filled with trees. You cannot see the ridge line when you're viewing it from Hot Meadow Street here or here. It's just simply a block. The CL&P property has a lot of trees that when they probably went in, when CL&P went in, they were buffer plantings. They were pine trees, 10 foot tall. Well, now they're 70 feet tall, and they completely obstruct the views to the ridge line from the entire portion of this middle piece. But what we tried to do is to say, where are these views? Where are the best views driving along Hot Meadow Street? So the Plan of Conservation and Development specifically asks for what's called terminal views from this road here and from Old Meadow Plain. And again, in the design, you'll see that those terminal views are actually celebrated and certainly preserved. Now, I will say for the record that these lines right here, I'll explain that in a minute. When we analyze this, we know what we're building today. So we know that we're going to be building a mix of different housing units. We have a solid design for that. We know those are going to be built. The future phases of this project, the commercial or the mixed-use phases, Garden Homes is not building those. However, somebody will come and they will end up building architecture and buildings on these. The purpose of this pad application and its subsequent approval is to some extent lock in the character, the scale that the town desires, so that when these future applications do come in, you have the ability to basically measure them against an established plan that hopefully the town is happy with.
Taking questions on that diagram, or do you? It's up to you.
Well, I'll wait if you don't want.
No, don't matter.
What these lines are is, and again, these are approximations of roof line right now. I took a halfway midpoint between a pitched roof and a flat roof, not knowing what commercial buildings, for example, would have. So bearing that in mind, this line here is approximately where a one-story building could be located, you know, almost 150 to 200 feet away from Hot Meadow Street, where somebody driving along Hot Meadow Street could theoretically see the ridge top over those roofs. The second line, same thing with a two-story building. Third line, same thing with a three-story building, and so on. Now, I'm going to go through this a little quickly, but I want to give you a sense of, I know you've driven by this 100 times, but in the lower left-hand corner, you see a little arrow. As I move through these pictures pretty quick, and I'll stop at a couple of them, as I move through these pictures, these are all shots of trying to see where you see that ridge line. Clearly right here, boom, right there, you don't see it. Existing vegetation blocks your view. So as this arrow moves, you can follow it. It goes to the south, stops at the property line, turns around, goes back to the north. A lot of vegetation. CLMP vegetation. More CLMP. As you can see, those pine trees planted years ago, probably to be buffers of this facility, have now overtaken.
So that's looking southeast.
This is looking southeast, correct. There's the arrow right there. Out Meadow Street's running south to the left, north to the right. We're moving past CLMP. Now I want to point out this, it's not clear on this projector, I guess, but so now we're looking at one of the better views of the ridgeline. Clearly we see that entire ridgeline. It's really hard to see here, but that's the three-story office building that's located just off the property to the back. That's important because we do have some three-story housing buildings, but all of them are located way back in the site for exactly that reason and because of this type of an analysis. Again, as now we're starting to see that little piece of vegetation that I spoke earlier about, that's the wetland. That's the wetland. We're coming around toward the southern part. Now again, tough to see right there. That's another three-story office building, part of the same complex, but much closer to Hot Meadow Street.
Is that an Avon?
It's an Avon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, in Avon, yeah. Just over the line.
Okay.
Making the turn. Welcome to Simsbury.
Okay, now that's the spot I was in.
That is the spot.
Yeah,
That's a beauty.
yeah,
That we want to keep, and that we're keeping.
good.
Okay? And you'll see how that works out. So we got the Hugh Blind Tower in the background, clearly. This is a beautiful, beautiful shot of that original. And, yeah. So again, CLMP. You get a glimpse of it here. This is another one of the pretty good views as you're moving north.
Could you just go back 2 slides? And
Sure.
With the CLMP, back. Maybe one more. Now where would the 2-story building and 3-story building? Now that's CLMP right there, correct?
CLMP's right here.
Right, how many stories is that?
Well, the building's only one, but the vegetation's probably 4.
Right.
Yeah.
So where would a 3-story roof line be? Or
Well-
would it not be in this picture at all?
The 3 stories won't be in this picture at all. They'll be set back, they're way in the back of the site, I'm gonna guess. They'll come up to maybe here.
About the top of the tree line.
About the top of the tree line.
And not, well, again, these trees in the back, they're probably 50, maybe 50, 60 feet tall. We can't have roofs greater than 40 feet to the midline, which means the top of the roof is maybe 50 feet on those 3 stories. And we only have them in the back. Should I move on?
Yeah. So that's looking north.
This is looking northeast, correct. Moving through CLMP again, traveling north. Traveling north. Again, we're getting close to Old Meadow Plain Road. And they're getting,
Is anything gonna be done with the CLMP building? Is that gonna remain exactly like it is?
it's gonna remain exactly like this. This is basically Old Meadow Plain Road, and again, you saw an image before where we basically, the terminal views from Old Meadow Plain and Blue Ridge are very important to this,
You have to get rid of those big trees,
which trees?
those two huge ones.
Oh,
at the
yeah.
end of the-
Well, I will say that there is, we haven't talked to the landowner about how far he wants to go with landscape or de-landscaping certain parts of his properties, but, there's a lot of scrub, brush and stuff along the road on Hot Meadow Street, where if you just got rid of some of the brush, I think you'd be able to open up things up quite a bit more. So, here's the development diagram. So this development diagram basically starts to look at how we manage open space, how we manage views, and how these development parcels start to take shape. So if you recall, we talked about those view lines. If you'll notice, the green is open space. 150 to 200 feet of unobstructed open space from Hot Meadow Street to where the nearest building would be. That open space system is augmented by basically common open space systems, and those common open space systems form the axial views of those terminal view sheds that we just talked about, across from Blue Ridge, across from Old Meadow.
Tell me what axial view means.
Terminal view, meaning just this is an unobstructed view to the mountains,
Okay.
specifically at those locations.
So the arrows certainly don't indicate the width of what you see, it just means that direction.
These arrows mean just that direction.
Yeah, okay.
That's
And the
right.
blue areas in this?
The blue areas represent good views in general. So when we talk about, you'll see the plan, but for example, these are buildings. See them ghosted in the background?
Mhm.
Those are one-story buildings, not two and not three. And they're right behind that line where our analysis suggested to us that that's where a one-story building with a flat or a low-slung roof could be placed without obstructing views to the ridge.
Okay, when you say to the ridge,
Yep.
you mean within 200 feet of the top? Or
Right,
halfway
just have to
up?
look over them to see.
You see the ridge line. The POCD is very clear about the ridge line.
The ridge line being the very top.
Being the very top. Now, we did, I don't know if but there is a fourth line on that graphic right here, and that is a three-story building where you see at least 200 feet of that ridge. We didn't, you could go on ad nauseum about, how much of that ridge you see, but we've tried to follow the tenet of the POCD, which is pretty clear about the ridge, able to see the ridge line of that system. So the program, basically this is the master plan, and as I suggested to you earlier, the original parcel is two parcels. This is one, this is two. Under this proposal, it's a mixed-use proposal, so it'd be segmented into basically three parcels. The primary housing component would be located on about 14 acres of land right here. We'll talk about the design of it in a minute. The mixed-use parcels would be a smaller parcel of about 6.2 acres here, and to the north, another parcel of about 5.73 acres here. The remainder of this piece would all be in single ownership. My guess is, at some point in time in the future, when there is development interest in that piece, there probably will be another, at a minimum, a lease line or a subdivision line, basically subdividing these two pieces. So what I'll do is I'll go over some of the building heights here.
Is it one contiguous parcel right now, or lot?
It's actually two pieces. Right now, that big line in the middle separates this piece.
That's a real property line.
That's a real property line, exactly right. So separates this piece from this piece.
Is there consideration of subdividing the lot to the south?
Well, the lot to the south, which is this lot, will be subdivided as part of the site planning process. If we're successful with the zone change, we come back with a full site plan package. Part of that package will include a subdivision application. And that subdivision will basically create these three lots, because Garden Homes will own and manage that access way, that driveway. So that, by the nature of that ownership, these two lots get bifurcated into two lots. So you end up with three lots there.
So parcel 2 will have some housing on it,
In the future, it could.
but that's not Garden Homes then.
Correct.
So Garden Homes is only gonna be the 3 parcels on the side.
It's actually just the one parcel. It's parcel 1B. This
So this
parcel here.
master development plan is for 2 properties. Or is it
The,
just-
the existing application and the existing condition is it is 2 properties. Correct.
This master development plan is for these 2 properties that you're describing?
Yes, yes. This is one property, this is another property, under a single ownership.
To put it another way, it's for the whole 60 acres, if that helps.
But the master development plan includes some things that nobody's come forward and should, the commercial stuff is out in the clouds.
Well, it is. I think this is the third or fourth pad application, and we've been involved in at least one of them, and that's been the case in almost all of them. What we're doing, understanding that we don't have a development entity that's willing to take those pieces down yet, those mixed-use pieces, we do 2 things. Excuse me. A, we look at the market in terms of what's feasible to go there in sort of the short to mid-term. What kind of businesses would potentially come here based on retail leakage and all the other things that the market analysts look at. The second is, what's the fiscal impact of that if it happens, in terms of tax base and all of that kind of thing. And third, and most importantly, this application, even though we don't have a developer today for those pieces, to some extent sets the development pattern for the site. So that when you do get that developer, you can go right back to that visual analysis. And if they come in with an application, for example, that brings buildings right up against Hot Meadow Street, that's a deniable action at this point, because you have a master plan that, and a zone change that basically established certain parameters by which the property owner has now acquiesced to following that now. And I will say something about the existing underlying zone. If we built under the existing underlying zone, if somebody wanted to build office space or industrial on 60 acres of land here, and we had a tenant for that, I can guarantee the property owner would jump for joy. But we wouldn't have to follow necessarily anything. We'd be locked into the existing zoning of the underlying zone, in which case those office buildings could be placed within 40 feet of Hot Meadow Street. Your coverage requirement is no more than 40%. Actually, this project, this proposal, has less coverage than the underlying zone would allow anyway.
So the idea under, just help me understand, the idea of the master plan under the PAD, for example, is so that we know in total what we should end up with, and so that we can plan for the whole area, right, Hiram?
Right.
And so that we have a notion of this comes, this comes, this comes, this won't interfere with that. So somebody comes along and wants to build some commercial or something or other that doesn't look like the master plan I'm looking at here. But they still could apply for it, and the zoning commission could still give it to them. There's nothing about the PAD that prohibits that.
It would still be a zone change now. In other words, if the PAD, if this PAD were approved, and somebody came in with another idea
That's what I'm
that
saying.
was significantly different, I think that's
Right.
what you meant.
That is what
They would have to come back for a change to that zone,
Yes.
go through the whole zone change process again. Because once this is established, that's the zone that's in place. I think that's what Chris is trying to
Yes.
say.
However, if the applicant comes in, and maybe these buildings don't look exactly like the buildings in our plan, and they're tweaked a little bit, and maybe this is one-story building instead of 3 separate ones, maybe the parking is tweaked a bit. If the zoning commission feels that that applicant has conformed with the intent of the approved master plan, then they wouldn't have to come back for a zone change. It would be approved as part of the site plan.
Hiram, if this commission should choose to give a positive referral, is there any inferred approval of a subdivision?
No. No, I think that if you have questions about it, we certainly can raise them at this time. You're not committed to approving the subdivision, but I think that if you look at this and the applicant's been clear about what they're asking for, if you think that there's some reason that it shouldn't be granted, I think it's reasonable to say you probably ought to state something on the record now. Now, if they were to come back in with something that was significantly different than this for a subdivision application, I think that would be a different story. But I think that there would be, I would call it a reasonable expectation that if they came back for this, you probably would look favorably upon it. I think that's the best way I can put it.
Okay. So just to break it down, so you have a full understanding of what each of these pieces means. Parcel 1A, this parcel here, that's a future commercial parcel with approximately 51,000 square feet of mixed uses in 2 stories. And what you should notice is that those buildings are pretty close to Hot Meadow Street, a lot closer than the funny little lines that I drew in the previous graphic. Reason being is that that existing wetlands, which we discussed with those trees, obscures any views to those mountains anyway. So we figured if we were going to get a little bit of square footage and marketability of the project, then that's where we would do it. So as we move north, these 3 buildings on parcel 1C total approximately 24,000 square feet. These are 1-story buildings for all the reasons that we discussed. As we move to parcel 2, total of 33 acres, the existing CL&P facility is about 49,000 square feet, but the remainder of parcel 2 would be about 91,000 square feet of mixed-use areas. And again, 1-story building there, 1-story building there, 2-story building there, only because you're so far back in the site at that point, it doesn't even matter. The site drops off pretty good. The terminal views are established, as we saw in our plan. Again, by the time you get back here, you're looking way, way over rooftops of buildings, no matter how tall they are. Always referring back to the plan of conservation and development, open space. Open space is a key component, and we touched a little bit on that. What I've tried to do in this graphic is to show you that 39, plus or minus 39% of the site is going to be reserved in open space. And the open space comes in a number of different forms. It's passive open space. The plan of conservation and development calls this, the proposed village green. It sets the character, that pastoral character for Hot Meadow Street. It is between 150 and 200 feet wide, depending on where you are in it. Other open spaces in the site really are more relative to 2 things. They're relative to the uses that are adjacent to them, and they're relative sometimes to our stormwater management system. These soils are so good here that we're pretty sure we can actually infiltrate stormwater into the ground 100% to provide the treatment and detention we need without having to go off-site for it, which is a smart growth goal, which is a goal of deep at this point, but that's not a subject for this discussion. But as you can see, there's a lot of open spaces. We try to set buildings, for example. You'll notice that there's open space between these back parking areas and these buildings. I mean, that's done purposefully so that the buildings feel like they're sitting in open space, not sitting next to a sea of parking. You don't see any seas of parking here. The parking is pretty well distributed, and it's sort of broken down, and it's divvied up by those open spaces.
How many acres, if you added up the acreage of open space, what would it be?
39% of 60. Actually, I can't see, but I think, does that say 20?
24.
24 acres.
Thank you.
So as you develop your parcel, you won't be worried about any roadways contiguous to the southern part or the northern part? Well, because, you'll have to be interconnections across the CL&P.
Eventually there will. In fact, frankly, the fire marshal is probably making us do one connection. We've had a meeting with the fire marshal already. He likes that connection right there as a secondary point of access into the site from the CL&P's driveway.
So the master plan is Garden Home's notion of how they should all go down. But what if a commercial guy comes along and says, well, that's Garden Home, but I don't want to do that. Then they have to go and they can get.
Well, but they go through this whole process again. And as Hiram pointed out, they'll go through a zone change because they'll soon find out that they're not conforming to the intent of.
Which you could argue they could do anyway.
Anybody can apply for anything, no question. Whether this commission or the zoning commission or design review ultimately likes it, that's another story, no question.
When the bike path was being discussed, CL&P sent a representative to a hearing I went to, and they were concerned about the things they store at the back of CL&P and people from the bike path getting to it or being near it or anything. What kind of additional security would there be to isolate that area from the folks that live in the apartments, and eventually that roadway that goes through.
I would imagine, and this is just me imagining right now, but I would imagine at the point in time where this development entity has interest, that the town would probably, as part of that, say, okay, we have to seriously begin to talk about that connection. Remember, this is a leased parcel. CLMP does not own the parcel. So they have leverage, but they don't own it. It would be my guess that if this was going to go through, that there'd be precautions CLMP would take on their own liability behalf, precautions to basically fence that off or do something to barricade off that, and we'd be granted with that access without the ability to access their storage yards.
And how long is their lease right
I don't know. Any more questions on this topic? So this is an enlargement of the Garden Homes parcel, and I've discussed much of what all of this text says already, so I'd just like to kind of summarize what is really going to get built here if we're successful with this application. The front commercial pieces, which I already discussed, will not get built as part of this application, but the rear will. And the rear includes lower density, lower buildings in the front, for all of those visual reasons that I pointed out, in addition to another tenet of the plan of conservation, it's transitional housing to the lower density residences across Hot Meadow Street. So these, for example, are townhouses, 2.5-story townhouses. That's what anchors the very front of the site. As you move back to sort of the next layer, you have some more townhouses. These are 2-story apartments. It's not until you get back here, it's almost 900 feet, that total distance. It's not until you get back here that you see some of the larger buildings, the 3-story buildings.
now? Are the townhouses for sales?
No, it would be rental.
Everything's for.
Everything's gonna be rental. We have an open space system that looks a little bit more graphically prevalent here. So you can see large tracts of open spaces. You can see how we're starting to break down the parking areas. Plan of conservation and development again, talks about public realm, talks about streetscape, talks about activating these streets. So the way we activate these streets is there's a load, probably half of our total on-site parking count is on the street. All of these big buildings, the typical apartment building would have a single entrance dead in the middle of that thing that gets you right to your elevator and up to your unit. We will have that, but the difference here is, I mean, we've convinced our client to, because of that street activation is so important, that every ground floor unit, almost every ground floor unit, will have a direct access out to that street. So it creates a more vibrant, you don't have sort of a dead building. And it makes a lot of sense because that's the primary open space. That's the clubhouse, that's the swimming pool. This is a bike storage area. This is the bike trail. But a lot of this is geared right around the bicycle system. The whole orientation of this primary green space is really geared toward accessing that major bicycle facility. I'd like to give you a glimpse of just some of the architecture. Again, Krosky Associates has been in town quite a bit, had a lot of applications in town. And I've worked with him for 30 years. He's real good at understanding local vernacular. So he understands when he starts looking at designing these things that he has to look at the surrounding area, the context of Simsbury's buildings. We know that there's going to probably be some brownstone finishing on the lower ends of these buildings, similar to what was approved by Landworks. That was one of the pad applications we had. So these are the townhouses. These are sort of that sort of front area that we were talking about. These are the 2-story apartment buildings. So all of this is going to have a similar character, but not look the same necessarily. And then these are the buildings that are located to the farthest rear of the site. These are the 3-story buildings, which we pointed out earlier.
Each building have 30 units?
No. The 3-story buildings have 30, the 2-story buildings have,
That's what I said. The 3-story units have 30 units.
yes, I think all 4.
And the 2-story units have 12 units?
Yes. Yep. A sense of what the clubhouse might look like, and I think that's probably what it is going to be looking like because, again, that's part of what Garden Homes will be building. Now, this is a a commercial building that we had Bill prepare, you know, his charge was, we know that we don't have a developer to build these yet. We know that a developer might not come in with an application that looks exactly like this, but if you had to build a commercial building in Simsbury, a one-story building, what would it look like? So this is basically a character sketch from the architect in terms of that. We don't know what a future architect will design for a future developer, but this is the character of what I guess we envision as part of this master plan process. Not going to get too much into parking and traffic, but we're being fairly conservative on our parking counts and therefore our pavements. So 1.78 spaces per residential unit is a pretty good average for, I think, this type of development. And 4 spaces per 1,000 of the mixed use is also a good average. That will clearly be tweaked by the uses that actually, for example, if a restaurant use comes in, I can pretty much guarantee you the restaurant may want more parking. The beauty of mixed use, though, is once all of this starts to get built out, the issue of shared parking starts to come alive. So this parking, so if this is a restaurant, and this is a grocery store, and this is an office, they all share the same, a certain percentage of the same parking spaces, giving you the ability to reduce some of that overall count. Now, I mentioned that we have a lot of our parking in the residential component on the street. So that's in the form of parallel parking, that's in the form of diagonal parking, but a lot of it is in the front of the street. That's enabled us to break up these parking fields, no large parking fields. And in addition, because of our stormwater management plan and our attempt at reducing pavements, we're going to put in reserve about 13% of the total residential parking. And put in reserve, I mean, it'll go into the green space, and that's not calculated as part of the 24 acres or whatever it was. So that's in addition, again, just to help mitigate some of the issues with pavement and parking.
The master plan, that building on the northern end, the largest, how many square feet does the master plan?
That,
Okay.
I believe that is 39 to 40,000 square feet, single story.
So you're gonna have one on the, you're gonna have one-story buildings up front, is that correct?
That's 1 story, and that's 1
On
story.
the other side?
1 story, 1 story, 1 story,
And then 2.5 behind that.
and 2.5 behind that, but it's set farther back.
Right.
Yeah,
And so the CLMP is 1 story,
1 story with.
and that's gonna be 2.5.
I'm sorry?
And that's gonna be 2.5, those,
Yeah,
okay.
yep.
And then behind that, you'll have 2 stories.
Yeah, I mean, these are 2.5 story townhouses, these are 2 story,
And then behind that will be
be
3.
the 3s.
Okay.
So the idea is that it gets higher the farther you go back, but the farther you go back, the less impact it has on the view shed.
But you have 2.5 up front.
Yeah, but it's about the same. So I mean, we could have, for example, we could have enlarged the roof line on that, right? So again, no need to review all of the detail of the sort of the traffic issue, but Fuss and O'Neill was the traffic engineer as part of the original River Oaks. That was a development of a magnitude that was double what we're proposing here. With respect to the plan of conservation and development and traffic, the salient point is to maintain the character of Hot Meadow Street as a two-lane thoroughfare. And this project doesn't even come close to necessitating widening the road, with the exception of a left turn lane, maybe 2 left turn lanes that are 100 feet long. A signal would be warranted at Blue Ridge Drive when the new driveway goes in, but not as part of the residential component alone, only when the full master plan is built out. So we don't meet the warrants, the traffic warrants from the state, to get that signal as part of the residential project. We do cross those thresholds once the project moves forward. Now, putting that signal in, you know, my traffic engineers have said that signal is going to be sort of a blessing, because there are certain parts of that part of Hot Meadow Street that don't operate at a terribly good level. Putting that signal in, and I'm not the expert on this, but putting that signal in helps stagger that traffic movement, allowing people out of the office complexes easier. You know, it would actually be a positive impact.
Still, though, even with that, you show several locations for the level of service out,
Mhm.
even with that.
Even with that.
Even with the light.
But it's not getting worse, and I don't think there are several,
I thought I saw 3, but I could be wrong. What, now your access from opposite Blue Ridge, you'll have to get permission to cross the wetlands.
Right, exactly. And we've been before them once, and we'll be going before them again in 2016. I mentioned earlier in the presentation the plan of conservation and development's desirable performance objectives. And these are a series of objectives that the developer or the designer or the planner should seek to try to meet with their planning and design of the property. And I think we've talked a lot about vistas and views and open space and the variety of housing options and building styles and heights, the different mix of uses, not necessarily with garden homes, but with the overall master plan. So we feel that we've tried to really comply with these kind of standard, these desirable performance objectives throughout the planning process. Again, access management, that's internal connectivity, which allows us to reduce the number of curb cuts on Hot Meadow Street. Connectivity and walkability, the entire site would be walkable through these connections, and as a result of its relationship with the bike path, its connectivity regionally to the town centers is achieved as well.
How physically do you connect with the bike path? Do you have like access point?
Yeah, that would be my guess. Yeah.
And what are you gonna do about when the public wants to park on the street there and get on the bike path?
Park on what street?
Your streets, and where you're the bike path. People are always looking for a place to leave their car.
Yes, they are. And actually, they can do that now, right here, I believe. Because the Nodbrook Wildlife Area, the access to that is through this driveway, and there's a road, a dirt road that I think parallels it. That's a dog safety training issue back
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Furthermore, again, there's a lot of objectives with this pad regulation, both in terms of the conformance with the POCD as well as the regulation itself. These are basically the additional evaluation criteria as part of the pad zone. And again, we meet and we sort of referred to these while we were laying out this property, and I'm certainly happy to discuss any one individually. So that, I think, wraps up my part of this, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion, so happy to open that up at this point.
Just one question about the view. That one view you showed looking northeast.
Yep.
And you said we're gonna leave.
Yep.
Okay. You mean you're gonna leave all of that, or just the ridge?
No, if you talk about the one on the southern,
The one from just north of, I think it was Blue Ridge, looking northeast, when you can see so much of the mountain. You can see it
right,
slope down.
as part of the housing component of this,
That's all right.
that's all right, yeah.
But the commercial might be a different story.
The commercial is a different story, but if you'll notice, there's a wide gap between the two-story buildings to the south. Okay, perfect. So between here and here, that's huge, right there. The whole idea, and the reason this road is even angled, is basically so that you can see between these, even if these roofs don't, even if you can see the ridge line above those roofs, the idea is that you see the whole bloody thing right there. That's what I'm referring to as a terminal view.
So we got one little shot at it.
Well,
Yeah.
the idea
We
is
got
that,
two little shots at it.
the idea
Make
is
sure
that
you
you
don't
see the ridge line in certain places, you look over buildings, but in other places, you have full shots of it.
Okay.
The northernmost building, the one-story, 39,000 square feet, what would be a potential use for that?
The thing that comes to mind immediately is a small grocer,
Here, what?
a small grocery store.
So just going back to the question about the 2.5-story townhomes?
He's right.
And Hiram probably would know better, I just don't know. But on your plan, it says a 3-story building.
I'm sorry?
It says a 3-story, it says first floor, second floor, third floor, and I'm just not that well versed in what constitutes a floor.
You're looking at townhomes now? Okay, yes.
Yeah, so it says first, second,
It's
and
got a
third?
bedroom in the roof peaks, is
Okay.
what it is.
So
That's
on
why
the
you see,
third,
you see dormers.
so on the third floor, it'll have a bedroom or a dormer?
The attic section.
Right.
The attic section, so it's a 3-story.
Well, it's called a 2.5-story.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, well, that's.
Questions?
Yeah, can you just go back to that previous slide you had there? If we look at parcels 1A, 1B, and 1C, and count up the open space, you have an idea how much that is? And actually take out the wetlands?
I can't do that. But,
Because if we were considering a subdivision, that's one property, okay? We want it, and someone's gonna wanna subdivide it into 3. We would consider looking for 20% open space in that subdivision, not counting the wetlands.
In each parcel.
Well, if they were to subdivide it again, we would ask for another 20% of that subsection. But if they're trying to go through as one parcel right now, or one subdivision with all 3 of those parcels, then it would be 20% at this time. And if they came in for a subdivision again, it would be another 20% of each of those subsets. Or it should be.
Mm-hmm.
They're subdividing it again, why wouldn't it be?
Because it's the original parcel hasn't changed in size. So it's the original 20% that you get when you divide the original parcel. If the parcel's already divided, there are 2 parcels, one north and one south here. I believe what the applicant's saying is that they would be looking for a subdivision into 3 parcels, A, B, and C, in that southern piece. That's 20%. Or, the other option that you have, depending upon which subdivision regulations you choose to use, is the fee in lieu of open space. The wetlands count for part of the open space, not all of it, but a portion of it. So for example, if you had 20% of that open space, depending upon how large the wetlands were, that counts for part of that open space, not all of it. You have to do that. I don't have the calculation because that question wasn't asked before, but it's a good question. You could take a look at that.
I can certainly circle back and provide Hiram that information. I'm pretty confident that even in just the housing component, we've got more than 20% open space.
When we use the word open space versus conservation easement, when we open space, by the definition, does that mean that the town has a responsibility?
No.
Well, depends.
That's what open space is supposed
I know,
to be.
There has to be but there's been lots of discussion recently with the Board of Finance, Parks and Rec, and Board of Selectmen with regard to who takes care of it, who maintains the open space. So that would be an issue in the future to discuss when a subdivision comes back in, whether it's a conservation easement with restrictions on it simply, or whether it's open space that's deeded to the town, or the land trust, or the Nature Conservancy, or whomever, or Audubon. But there needs to be another party that has an ability to enforce the maintenance of that particular parcel. It can't just be the developer saying, we're gonna say that this is open space and we'll take care of it. Otherwise, the town has no access to maintain that or require the maintenance of that. But that would be an excellent question at the time of subdivision.
So are we considering this open space access to the rest of the town, so the rest of the town can use this open space at
Well,
will?
that's one of the questions that has to be answered at that time, Mark, as I just said. The nature of it, who takes care of it, who has access to it, and so on. This is private property.
Understandable, but open space is supposed to be accessible to the general public, correct?
Depends upon how it's defined at the time. If it's
But
public
then
open
by who?
space, I'm just telling you, if the public open space, then the town has to maintain it.
Now, I understand that, but who defines what you're suggesting here?
Well, in any
We
of the
do.
subdivisions that we've done since I've been here, it's defined in the conservation documents that are approved at the time of the approval of the subdivision. We've had conservation easements on properties where they're not open to the public. We've had open space that has been provided that is open to the public. It depends upon the context. If you think, for example, if the commission thinks it's appropriate for people to have access to open space simply to walk through the yards, that's a question you have to address at the time of subdivision. If the point is it possible to get from Hop Meadow Street through this property to the trail, that's a public access easement as well. But that's something that you would take up at the time of the proposed subdivision to decide what's appropriate. Taking open space for the sake of taking open space is not only expensive, but it really doesn't serve any public purpose.
Yeah, like, we lose taxes on it too. Or a conservation easement, I think historically we've still get taxes paid on it and we don't take care of it. So,
That's correct. And again, that's becoming,
there's a lot of, quote, open space, however the word is used. A lot land without buildings on, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
What's the distance?
Well, why don't we start calling parking lots open space then?
What's the distance between the bike path and the three-story building?
Right here. Right there, at that point.
Yeah, well, yeah, that would be the access point, right? One a little bit over would be the
Well,
access.
actually, the bike access is gonna be right here. So
Right.
these, the back of this building, let's see, that's parallel parking, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, maybe 70 feet, 80
70
feet.
feet.
Can I just ask you a question about living units? What is it, 187?
181.
Maybe 181, okay. And your market analysis indicates that there's sufficient demand for that. One thing I read in your stuff was there's a chance that you may draw some of the people interested in an apartment in another town may come here instead. And it would even be better for you. But doesn't it also work in reverse? I mean, Bloomfield just approved 470 apartments. That's a big number. And it's just 9 minutes from there. Okay? That doesn't change any of this? Windsor just approved 170 more. None of that matters?
No.
That's a lot of
I mean,
apartments.
our market people, as part of that analysis, if you read, they reviewed all of the background data, all the recently approved projects, they added all that into
Because
there.
it's only just happened, so that's why.
Yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, in Hartford County, those are happening way more than just in Bloomfield.
Right,
That's
so to
excellent.
your point, right, though, how many recently approved apartments do we have in Simsbury?
Yeah, and those were taken into consideration. Ensign Bickford was the most recent, for example.
So total, how many were recently approved?
I don't know off the top of my head, I mean, if you've got the
Well, there's improved and then the pipeline. and
300 to 400, I believe,
Close
between what's been,
450, yeah.
yeah, 400. Sounds right. We presented this informally to a combined commission of zoning and design review, as part of this process. And some of these questions came up, and at the time, we had our market person here, but we hadn't done the full study, hadn't done the full analysis. So the market analysis panned out very similar to what our market analyst suggested at that meeting. So some of the same comments came back, and the chairman of the zoning commission, I believe, basically said, you know, Garden Homes has a presence in Connecticut, a substantive presence in Connecticut already. They understand the market. They're willing to make this investment. They must think that this is a viable investment for them.
I'd rather be the first company to build a bunch of apartments than the last.
True.
And I think you're probably the fourth applicant to come before us in the last 2 months.
That may be right.
Other comments, questions?
How long is this, when does this referral have to be submitted?
The zoning hearing is October 16th, I believe, October 6th in October.
And so we have until that point?
You have another meeting on the 23rd, so you have another meeting prior to any zoning meeting.
In that interim, are we gonna talk about the open space? I'm just, I don't know, if we make a referral, should not that be part of the suggestion of how that's handled? Or who, or does zoning take care of that? How do we?
Well, I think, as the statute says, you know, the primary responsibility of the commission is to talk about the plan of conservation and development and any other recommendations the planning commission deems relevant. So if that's a relevant consideration, then obviously you could make those comments. If there are questions or things that you need researched between now and your next meeting, I'm happy to do that. I'm sure if I don't have the answer as part of the package, the applicant could provide that information too, if you feel more comfortable with that. The question before came about open space in parcel, I think 1A, B, and C. I think that total amount of acreage was 9.92, almost 10 acres of open space in that 1A, B, and C. So if that answers your question from before, now I'm not sure about it.
That was including the wetlands?
That's the open space of the whole area, correct?
Yeah.
Wetlands and buffer disturbance is separate, it's broken out on,
Actually, the wetland itself
Sheet
is
one.
very small, it's a ditch, so it's a linear ditch. The upland review area, of course, is 100 feet away from that ditch, so that would be considered open space. So there's actually not that much open space in wetlands per se.
So you have 9 acres of the 26 acres, or 27 acres that we have now.
I don't know what the total parcel size,
It's 26 acres
21,
approximately.
yeah, 21.9 is the total, but that's, let's see, 6,
11,
14, 5,
25,
21.
You have about 26.
25, 26, yep.
and so we've calculated out that we have, what, 9 acres of open space
Yeah, that-
supposedly?
9.9, almost 10, yep.
Arm's actually looking at the data chart, the site data chart that was submitted as part of it.
Again, I would say this, I mean, in all honesty, the applicant would like to have a recommendation this evening, but if the commission's uncomfortable with that, I certainly understand that. If you have other questions that you want researched or you would like answers to prior to making your recommendation, I certainly understand that as well.
Maybe the way this works too, and Hiram's correct, we would love to get hopefully a positive referral tonight. And if there are questions and concerns, or even conditions, my guess is that we could talk about anything, everything's on the table. And as we go through the process, we can set conditions that you would like to have, and if we all agree, those conditions move their way through the process and end up at the zoning board. Part of the process.
I know my concern is we're talking about taking parcel number one as one piece, but then knowing that there will probably be some type of subdivision coming down the road. And right now, we're encompassing the entire parcel one, for open space. And we're using that as a criteria. This is the open space for the entire parcel, correct?
Under
As
this-
part of the master plan, right?
Under this plan, that's right, Bob.
Coming down the road, if there's a subdivision application, it's gonna have to all be reviewed.
Well, we'll be reviewed by this
Right.
commission, absolutely.
Right.
The other thing that can happen too is, because the applicant has stated that they're not gonna develop at this time, the front two parcels, that the specifications for those parcels with regard to coverage, those are minimums, frankly, if this goes forward. Because if the commission, the zoning commission ultimately decides to approve the zone change, and let's just say the open space for those parcels ended up being, I don't know, 39%, or whatever the number happens to be. If somebody came in with a proposal to reduce that, again, that would be a serious consideration, that they would come back to this commission and say, you know, is that acceptable to you as well? So I think that the open space that's shown here, again, should this go forward, would have to be considered minimums rather than maximums.
The other thing is, we're approving a master plan for two parcels, but we're really only talking about the parcel number one.
In terms of immediate development?
Yes.
Correct.
And only part of that.
And only part of that, exactly.
But if your recommendation, and that's why I read the statute language, if the recommendation of the commission is that the master plan as shown and as submitted is what you're making your recommendation on, that's going to be important not only to the design review when they look at it, but also important to the zoning commission as well.
We've done that with like Ensign Becker property.
That's
Or
correct.
to same time.
That's correct. The other thing too, that, people get concerned about the number of apartment units. I think when the Ensign Bickford Ensign Bickford Realty PAD was approved, that was a long-range plan. I think that they stated even during that meeting that that's probably going to be 3 to 5 years before that gets built out. I would certainly agree with the market folks and take a look at their marketing report. It has to speak for itself. I certainly can. But I think that it may turn out that by the time somebody who's going to build 3 to 5 years from now may not be constructed, it may not be built, whereas this particular applicant who insists that they're going to go forward immediately may actually go forward and may get built. It's all going to work out in terms of the market. Ultimately, if there's no market there, they're probably not going to get financing. They're probably not going to go forward if there's no market there. So I don't think that anyone's gonna rush to build, you know, every single project that's been approved to its maximum at this point in time, just doesn't make any sense, frankly. I think what the zoning commission has looked at, they've asked the same questions, and we're doing that analysis right now, that housing analysis. We'll have that to them probably next week, in terms of
Can you
where we
share
are.
that with us?
Mhm. Yep, exactly, we'll have that for you at your next meeting. So, I think the market is gonna prevail, and I'm not sticking up for the applicant here, I'm just simply stating the fact, I think that it doesn't make any sense if there's no market there to build those things, so I think that's gonna happen.
To me, it's not a question, is there a market now? I think there is, it's how deep it is.
Well,
How
again,
long
we're,
it'll last.
we're putting together a lot of information on that. I think it'll be interesting, an interesting read for you, as soon as we get some time at our next meeting to take a look at that.
I was curious to know the traffic study part of that. Does that incorporate just the piece that's going to be built now, or does that incorporate as if the whole thing was completely built out with, like you say, like a supermarket or something over there? Okay. Is it just a couple of pages of that, or is there a separate report?
There's,
Details of that?
it's summarized in the executive summary, which is the beginning of the report, and then the detail and the data is contained in the appendix.
Okay, oh, that's fine. I have it.
The the application refers to 34 Hot Meadow Street, I think, right? 34. Which property is that? Is that the
C L and
southern?
P, isn't it?
It's actually both.
It's actually, yeah, both.
Two owners,
Same-
or two properties, same address,
Same owner.
Same owner.
same owner.
He owns the whole 60 acres.
But it's two lots.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason is typically the assessor or the building department doesn't assign lot numbers
It's a vacant
to
land.
land that's vacant, correct?
I mean, I don't want to hold the applicant up, but I mean, if everyone at this table hasn't gone through the 134-page thing that we have online, it's, I mean, we could take another 2 weeks and go through. I mean, I could do it again. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, and based on Chris's, the stuff we discussed tonight, but I don't know, since you're not going to zoning until after our next meeting, would you feel more comfortable going through this stuff again and thinking about it and giving her questions, whether we need to have you come back or not, or getting questions answered, or what's the comfort level here? Or you?
I'm not prepared to do it tonight.
I'm not prepared.
This is a big thing. We should take our time and talk and think about it. It's a big thing.
I mean, there's obviously a lot of information online, and I think maybe what we should do is go through it ourselves within a reasonable period of time, and then any questions that come out, email them to Hiram, and he can ask the applicant, so the next time we can be efficient and have a ducks in a row. Because obviously you've done a lot of work, and you know, with the market thing and taxes and everything, and I just think it takes a while to absorb the whole picture. So, everybody feel comfortable with that?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep.
We'll get back to you.
Fire away.
Okay, all right, thanks again.
Do we need a motion for that?
I'm sorry,
Do we need a
do
motion?
we need a motion
Keep
for
it
that?
open?
No, it's okay.
No, it's open until.
Okay, keep it open.
Let's open. Not a public hearing,
No.
just, so we decided to take no action.
All right.
I would suggest that any comments that the commissioners have be forwarded to Hiram by the end of this week.
How about Monday?
Well, yeah,
Because
because
we can take a look
with
at
my schedule, I'd rather read it again over the weekend. We'll do it Monday.
We want to make sure there's adequate time for the applicant to reply.
I'll give them another week.
Yeah, don't hit reply all, because you're creating a meeting for that. And just send it to me, I'll put it all together and give it all to you, you know, prior to your next meeting. But if you hit reply all, then basically you've created a meeting outside the meeting entity, so.
Right, so, yeah, everything will go to Harry, we'll put it together, come back to us as a single thing, rather than reply alls. I'm not big on reply alls anymore.
So we're not gonna be aware of each other's questions
We will,
until,
Harry will put them together.
until after you
Yeah.
receive them all and feed them back to us.
Compile them all, you'll see them all, I'm not gonna change anything or whatever, but I'll compile them all.
I think that way we're not being nickel and dimed all the time. We'll have one thing a document to look at, so we can then you won't be really.
That'd be great, that'd be great.
Communication and administrative business.
I just want to let the commission know, in case you haven't met Rachel yet, Rachel Platt is the new assistant town planner. She's taking over for Howard and filling shoes and learning. She's just been here a very few days, but you'll see a lot more of her in the near future, so we just want to make sure that y'all knew who she was and go forward from there. If you have any questions for her or whatever, just feel free to fire away. She's ready for them, I'm sure.
Does that make her conservation officer? Or
She will be ultimately, yeah. She's in the process now of getting certified for both Casio and wetlands. So,
Welcome.
worldwide
What-
experience. in
What's
lots
your
of-
background quickly? Where'd you go to school, or where did you work before?
So I did my undergrad at Barnard in New York in architecture and urban studies. My master's in city planning at MIT. Was in Germany for 9 months at Albert Speer and Partner. It's a consulting office doing planning in the Middle East, as well as around Europe. And then came back here and was in Enfield all last year.
sounds pretty good to me.
Great, thanks very much. That's all I have.
Hiram, you have nothing?
No, I will, as I said, we're working to finish up that analysis of the apartments that both you and the zoning commission asked me about. We'll have that for you at your next meeting. We're almost done, just a couple of tweaks that people have asked a couple of questions. I'll have that for you at your next meeting too.
All right, on to the minutes. We have to approve the minutes of July 22nd, 2014, our last regular meeting before our summer break. Please refer to them. Do we have any additions, deletions, changes to page 1? Hearing none. Page 2. Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Have a second? Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes of the 22nd of July, 2014, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, all nay?
I'll
Unanimous.
abstain. I was not here.
Before we adjourn,
One abstention.
You can come and look at it.
There aren't any extra copies?
Abstention. Thanks.
Hi, I'm sticking
I'd like to thank SCTV and Ken for being here tonight.
Making a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you again.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.